The hospital room was quiet, except for the steady beep of the heart monitor. I stared at my phone, the screen still warm from the sixth call. I'd just ended 6 children. I had raised, and 6 variations of the same response. Sorry, Mom, I'm swamped with this case. The firm just brought in a new client and the partner put me in charge. Bryce said, his voice carrying that familiar clipped tone he used when he was too busy for a real conversation. The hospital is short-staffed this weekend. We've got 3 surgeons out with that flu that's going around. Vivian explained the sounds of a busy hospital corridor in the background. My investors are flying in from Singapore tomorrow, and I have about 1,000 things to prepare. Can I call you next week? Asher asked, not really expecting an answer. The kids have soccer tournaments all weekend, and Jason can't take them by himself. You know how he gets overwhelmed. Camille sighed the exhaustion in her voice, making her sound far older than 37. I have finals to grade, and the department head wants them by Monday, Paxton said, the excuse sounding thin even to my ears, but it was my youngest Laurel who said what they were all thinking. Mom, we have our own lives now. You can't just call us every time you have a problem. Have you thought about hiring a home health aide or something? I placed my phone on the bedside table with trembling hands. The doctor had used the phrase minor heart attack, but there was nothing minor about the revelation that came with it. I was completely alone, despite having given birth to and raised 6 children. My name is Eleanor Matheson, and at 65 years old, I was finally learning the true cost of unconditional love. I came to America from Ireland. At 20, full of dreams and determination, Boston became my home, its brick buildings and winding streets reminiscent of Dublin, but with endless possibilities. Stretching before me, I worked my way through nursing school, taking extra shifts at a diner near Fenway Park, saving every penny until I had enough for tuition and books. That's where I met Harrison Matheson, handsome, ambitious, and as I would later discover, utterly self-centered. He was in his first year of business school, slumming it at the diner with his classmates after Red Sox games. He left me an outrageous tip the first time I served him, and his phone number scrawled on a napkin. I was young, I was flattered, I was foolish. We married a year later against my mother's warnings from across the ocean. American men want American wives. She had written in her carefully penned letter, they may play with Irish girls, but they marry their own kind. But Harrison seemed different. He praised my work ethic, my practical nature, my determination. He said I was nothing like the entitled girls he'd grown up with in Connecticut. I thought that was a compliment. We had 6 children in 12 years. Bryce came first, serious, and focused even as a child with Harrison's sharp features and my green eyes. Then Vivian, with her quick mind and quicker tongue, always first to answer any question. Asher followed, always taking things apart, to see how they worked, from clocks to radios, to eventually computers. Camille, my artistic dreamer, who could spend hours arranging flowers or coloring pictures. Just so Paxton, quiet and thoughtful, who learned to read at 4 and never stopped. And finally, Laurel, my baby, who came into the world already knowing what she wanted and how to get it. When Harrison walked out, Laurel was just 3 and Bryce was 15. I remember the day with painful clarity. A Tuesday in October, the leaves turning red and gold outside our windows. He packed while I stood in our bedroom doorway, stunned into silence. This family thing isn't for me, he said, folding designer shirts into an expensive leather suitcase I'd never seen before. You're better with the kids anyway. They barely notice when I'm gone. That wasn't true. They had noticed every late night at the office, every missed baseball game and dance recital. They would notice his permanent absence even more. What about support? I finally managed to ask, my throat tight with unshed tears. I'll send checks, he said, not looking at me. I'm not a monster, Eleanor. No, not a monster. Just a man who had decided that the life he'd built, the children he'd fathered, the woman he'd promised to love, were all disposable, replaceable. Optional. The checks came for a while, never quite enough, always slightly late. Then they dwindled. Then they stopped altogether. I later learned he had moved to California, started a new tech business, and never looked back. Years later, Asher would find him on LinkedIn, a smiling profile picture showing him with a new wife and 2 stepchildren living in a glass and steel mansion in Malibu. I didn't have time to fall apart. 6 children needed to be fed, clothed, loved, and guided. I took extra shifts at the hospital, working nights, so I could be there when they came home from school. I sewed Halloween costumes at midnight, baked birthday cakes at dawn, and learned to fix leaky faucets and patch drywall because there was no money for repairmen. The colonial house in Dorchester that Harrison and I had purchased became my 7th child. Aging, demanding, but sheltering us all through winters and summers, first days of school, and graduation parties. I could never afford to move to a nicer neighborhood, but I made that house a home with secondhand furniture lovingly restored and walls painted in warm colors to hide the cracks. In the winter, I stuffed towels under doors to keep out drafts because the heating bills were already too high. In summer, we slept with windows open and fans whirring because air conditioning was an unaffordable luxury. I learned to stretch a pound of ground beef into a meal for 7, to turn stale bread into bread pudding to make Christmas presents. Out of fabric scraps and love. The children grew. Bryce, always the responsible oldest, helped with his siblings taking on paper routes and bagging groceries as soon as he was old enough to work. Vivian's intelligence earned her scholarships to private school, where she thrived among peers who challenged her. Asher's curiosity led him to computers, teaching himself programming. From books borrowed from the library, Camille covered every surface with sketches and designs, turning thrift store clothes into fashion statements. Paxton lost himself in books building worlds in his mind, when the real one was too harsh. Laurel directed her siblings in homemade plays, already showing the commanding presence that would later serve her well. I was so proud of them. Every report card, every sports medal, every art prize felt like validation. Yes, their father had abandoned us, but look at these amazing children I was raising. Look at how well we were doing, despite everything. You're a saint. Other nurses would tell me at work, shaking their heads in admiration. I don't know how you do it all. I wasn't a saint. There were nights I cried in the shower so the children wouldn't hear. Days I was so tired, I fell asleep at red lights driving home from work. Moments I resented Harrison so fiercely I had to step outside just to breathe. But I kept going because what choice did I have? When Bryce got into Columbia Law School, I remortgaged the house. The loan officer looked at my financial statements with concerned eyes. Miss Matheson, are you sure this is wise? The monthly payments will increase significantly. My son is going to be a lawyer, I said firmly. He'll be able to help with the mortgage once he's established. That was the unspoken agreement I thought I would sacrifice now, and they would help later when I needed it. That's how family worked. When Vivian was accepted to medical school at Northwestern, I took a second job administering vaccines at a pharmacy. 12-hour shifts at the hospital, followed by 4 hours, giving shots to cranky children and adults afraid of needles. My feet swelled so badly I had to buy shoes a size larger. When Asher needed seed money for his tech startup, I sold my mother's jewelry. The emerald ring she'd left me, the gold watch that had been her mother's, the pearl earrings I'd worn on my wedding day. Heirlooms traded for lines of code and a business plan scribbled on coffee-stained napkins. This is going to be huge, Mom, he promised, eyes bright with the fever of entrepreneurship. I'm going to make you rich. When Camille wanted to open her own design studio, I gave her my retirement savings for the deposit on a converted warehouse space in Seattle. It's the perfect location, she gushed over the phone. All the tech companies are moving in, and they all need interior designers. I'll double your investment in a year. When Paxton struggled with student loans after his PhD, I paid them off with the money I'd been saving for a knee replacement. The pain was getting worse, but I could manage with braces and anti-inflammatories. His freedom from debt seemed more important than my mobility. When Laurel needed funding for her first independent film, I took out a personal loan, adding another monthly payment to my already stretched budget. It's about family. Mom, she explained, her voice passionate, about a mother's sacrifice. You're going to see yourself in it. I never said no. How could I? Their success was my success. Their dreams were my dreams. What else did I have? The first time I noticed the change was at Bryce's wedding. He was 30, marrying a fellow lawyer from a wealthy Connecticut family. The ceremony was at the Harvard Club, all dark wood and old money. I wore a dress I'd saved for months to buy, navy blue, with silver beads that I thought looked elegant. Mom, Bryce said when he saw me, his smile tight, wouldn't you have been more comfortable in something simpler? Later, I overheard him telling his new in-laws that I was just a nurse, just as if the profession that had fed and clothed him for years was something to be embarrassed about. I told myself he was nervous, trying to fit in with his new family. I tried not to let it hurt. The calls became shorter, the visits less frequent. Holidays became complicated, negotiations rather than joyful reunions. Mom, Samantha's parents have this tradition of going to Aspen for Christmas. Mom, we're going to Jason's family this year. They've already bought the plane tickets. Mom, we're taking the kids to Disney for Christmas. Maybe we can do something in January. I told myself it was normal. They had their own families, now their own traditions to build. But the ache in my chest grew with each empty holiday, each birthday remembered with only a hurried text message. Last Thanksgiving, I cooked a turkey anyway, though I knew no one was coming. Force of habit, perhaps, or just denial. I set the table for 7. 1 for me and 6 for the ghosts of my children. I sat alone and ate dry turkey and lumpy mashed potatoes, then packed it all up in containers I would never get back and took them to a homeless shelter downtown. God bless you, said the man who accepted the food. Your family must have had other plans. Yes, I said. My smile brittle. They're very busy, very successful. When I tripped on the porch steps and sprained my ankle badly, I called Paxton, who lived closest. He was just across the city teaching literature at Boston College. Can't you call a neighbor? He asked, sounding distracted. I have midterms to grade. Or call an ambulance if it's that bad. I did call a neighbor. Gloria Martinez, 73 years old, drove me to the emergency room and sat with me for 4 hours while they took x-rays and fitted me with a boot. She helped me home and brought me meals for a week. She had only known me for 2 years since she moved in next door after her husband died. My children would help, but they're so busy. I told her, the lie sour on my tongue. She said, setting a container of homemade soup on my kitchen counter. Too busy for their mother. Strange children you have. The following month, when Vivian called asking if I could loan her $10,000 for a down payment on a vacation home in Michigan, I hesitated for the first time. I'd need to check my accounts. I said, thinking of my dwindling savings, the property taxes due next month, the roof that needed replacing. Mom, she laughed, you always have emergency money stashed away. Remember how you used to say that you're the queen of saving for a rainy day? I had been, but the rainy days had come so often for my children that the emergency fund had dwindled to almost nothing. I sent her $5,000 and ate soup from cans for dinner for the next 3 months to rebuild my savings. She never mentioned paying it back. For my 65th birthday, I thought things would be different. Retirement age a milestone. I reserved a private room at my favorite Italian restaurant and sent invitations 2 months in advance. I bought a new dress, emerald green, that brought out my eyes and hid the extra weight I'd gained since menopause. I even splurged on having my silver hair professionally colored and styled. One by one, the regrets rolled in. Bryce had a case going to trial. You know how it is, Mom. The justice system doesn't stop for birthdays. Vivian was presenting at a medical conference. It's a huge honor to be asked. I can't say no. Asher was meeting with international investors. This could take the company public. Mom, billions with a B. Camille's daughter had a dance recital. You understand putting your kids first, right? Paxton had promised to take his girlfriend to Martha's Vineyard. It's our anniversary. I already booked everything. Laurel was in the middle of a film shoot. Hollywood doesn't care about birthdays, Mom. We're on a schedule. I canceled the reservation and spent my birthday evening with Gloria, who brought over a small cake and a bottle of Irish whiskey. You gave them everything, she said, pouring us each a finger of the amber liquid. What did you keep for yourself? I had no answer. 2 weeks later, I felt the crushing pain in my chest while gardening in my small backyard. If Gloria hadn't come over to borrow sugar, I might have died among my tomato plants and marigolds. The heart attack was, as the doctor said, relatively minor, but it was enough to land me in the hospital and make me face the truth I'd been avoiding for years. As I lay in that hospital bed after making those 6 futile phone calls, something broke inside me, but it wasn't my heart this time. It was the chains of obligation and sacrifice that had bound me for decades. I checked myself out of the hospital against medical advice the next day. Gloria drove me home, clucking with disapproval, but respecting my decision. I need to make some changes, I told her as we pulled into my driveway. Will you help me? The next morning, I called Terrence Walsh, an attorney, specializing in estate planning, whom I'd met through the hospital when his mother was a patient. I need to rewrite my will, I said when he arrived at my house, legal pad in hand. Of course, he replied, settling into my worn sofa. I assume you want to divide everything equally among your children. No, I said, the word feeling foreign but liberating on my tongue. I want something very different. For the next hour, I outlined my plan. Terrence listened, eyebrows rising occasionally, but taking diligent notes. When I finished, he looked at me with newfound respect. Mrs. Matheson, if I may say so, you're a woman after my own heart. I'll have the papers drawn up by next week. Next, I called Ruby Chen, a former colleague who had left hospital nursing to provide private care. I don't need a nurse, I told her. I need a companion. Someone to travel with me and help me start living again. With those 2 calls, my plan was in motion. I took out a home equity line of credit on my house, the house that was now worth over $2 million due to Boston's soaring real estate market. The house that had been my prison and my children's launching pad. When the bank officer looked surprised at my application, I smiled. I'm not getting any younger, I told him, and it seems I've been sitting on a gold mine all these years without enjoying it. First came the renovations. Bryce's old room became my yoga and meditation space, painted a soothing blue with bamboo flooring, and a small fountain that made the sound of a gentle stream. Vivian and Camille's shared bedroom transformed into a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a reading nook beneath the window where I could curl up with the novels I'd never had time to read before. Asher's room became my art studio, filled with light and the supplies for painting and pottery I'd always wanted to explore. His old computer desk where he'd written his first code was replaced by an easel and pottery wheel. Paxton and Laurel's rooms were combined into a spacious guest suite for when Gloria or my new friends came to visit, with a luxurious bathroom featuring a soaking tub I'd dreamed of for years. The contractors were puzzled by my instructions to remove all traces of the room's previous occupants. Usually people want to preserve some elements for nostalgia, the project manager said. I've had enough nostalgia, I replied. I'm interested in the future now. I enrolled in French cooking classes at the community college, learning to make delicate pastries and rich sauces. I joined a senior dance group that performed at local theaters. My body remembering the joy of movement it had known in youth, I started writing my memoirs, the story of an Irish immigrant who gave everything to her children and was learning at last what it meant to give to herself. Ruby helped me set up accounts on Facebook and Instagram. We took selfies in front of my newly painted front door, a bright, defiant red. We documented my first attempt at soufflé, failed spectacularly but delicious anyway, and my first watercolor painting, surprisingly not terrible. We posted photos from our weekend trips to Cape Cod, to New York City, to Washington, D.C. None of my children followed my accounts, though they were all active on social media. I saw their lives through their own carefully curated photos: Bryce's legal awards, Vivian's medical conferences, Asher's tech parties, Camille's design showcases, Paxton's academic publications, Laurel's film premieres. Lives so full and successful, there was no room for an aging mother. 3 months after my heart attack, Ruby and I boarded a plane to Ireland. My first return to my homeland in 45 years. We visited the small village outside Dublin where I grew up, the stone cottage still standing, though occupied by strangers. Now we drove the Ring of Kerry, the green hills and blue ocean, healing something deep within me. We continued to Paris, to Rome, to Barcelona. All of it documented, shared, commented upon by a growing circle of online friends and followers, many of them women my age discovering their own second chapters. You should start a blog, Ruby suggested one evening as we sipped wine in a small cafe in Montmartre. So many women would be inspired by your story. So I did. I called it Eleanor's Second Act, and wrote about reinvention, about finding joy after 60, about the courage to put yourself first after a lifetime of putting others ahead of you. Not once during those 3 months did any of my children call to check on me. I saw from their social media that they were aware I was traveling. Paxton had even commented on a mutual friend's post asking if I was going through some kind of midlife crisis. At 65. As if my life was already mostly over. When December arrived, I sent out invitations for a Christmas gathering at my home, elegant cards professionally printed, not the homemade ones I used to send with photographs of the children. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Gloria asked when I told her my plan. "They don't deserve your hospitality." "This isn't about what they deserve," I replied. "This is about what I need to do for myself." To my surprise, all 6 children accepted. Perhaps they'd heard about my heart attack through mutual acquaintances. Perhaps they felt guilty. Perhaps they were just curious about the sudden silence from their usually available mother. On Christmas Eve, my house gleamed with subtle decorations. No longer the explosion of lights and ornaments from when the children were young, but an elegant arrangement of evergreen boughs, white lights, and silver accents that Ruby had helped me design. I wore a simple but expensive black dress, a strand of real pearls, to replace my mother's that I'd sold for Asher, and light makeup that enhanced rather than disguised my age. Ruby had done my hair in a sophisticated updo that made me look like the grandmother in a luxury watch advertisement. Aging gracefully with dignity and style. The doorbell rang at precisely 4 o'clock. I smoothed down my dress and opened the door. Bryce stood there, his wife Samantha and their 2 children, beside him all dressed like they'd stepped out of a catalog. The children, my grandchildren, looked at me with the polite curiosity of meeting a distant relation. "Mom," Bryce said, leaning in for a brief hug. "You're looking different." "Thank you," I replied, ushering them in. "So is the house." I watched their eyes widen as they took in the transformed space. Gone was the worn furniture, the faded curtains, the dated wallpaper. In their place were modern, comfortable pieces in neutral tones with splashes of rich color, art hung on freshly painted walls. Some purchased, some created by my own newly discovered talent. "Where's the Christmas tree?" Samantha asked, looking around the living room. "In the sunroom," I replied. "I've gone for a more minimalist approach this year." "It's very modern," Bryce said clearly, searching for something positive to say. "Did you win the lottery or something?" "In a manner of speaking," I replied with a smile. I discovered the value of what I already had. One by one, the others arrived. Vivian with her husband, no children but a practiced smile. Asher alone, perpetually married to his work, looking at my renovated home with an appraiser's eye. Camille with her husband and 3 children, looking harried despite her stylish appearance. Paxton with his girlfriend, both of them dressed in academic casual. Laurel Lass sunglasses perched on her head despite the Boston winter, as if she might be recognized even here. "Mom, what happened to all our stuff?" Laurel asked, wandering through the first floor. "Where are the old photos?" The Christmas ornaments we made in school. In storage, I replied. I decided it was time for a change. They followed me on an impromptu tour, their confusion growing, as they discovered their childhood bedrooms transformed beyond recognition. Where are we supposed to sleep when we visit? Asher asked, standing in what had been his room, now filled with art supplies. The guest suite is available when needed, I replied, though none of you have needed it for years. But where's my coding trophy? He pressed, and my MIT acceptance letter that was framed on the wall. As I said in storage, I can send them to you if you'd like. We gathered in the dining room where Ruby had helped me prepare a meal that bore no resemblance to our traditional Christmas dinners. No turkey or ham, but beef. Wellington. No mashed potatoes, but truffle risotto. No green bean casserole, but haricots verts with almonds. Who's this Ruby person you keep mentioning? Vivian asked, a slight edge to her voice. Some kind of hired help. Ruby is my friend and companion, I replied, serving the risotto. She's been more present in my life these past few months than anyone at this table. The conversation was stilted, full of careful questions about my health that came too late, and updates on their lives that I'd already gleaned from social media. I answered pleasantly, passing dishes and pouring wine, waiting for the moment. It came during dessert. A perfect creme brulee that I'd mastered in my cooking class. I've been meaning to talk to all of you about something important, I said, setting down my spoon. I've made some changes to my will and financial arrangements. 6 pairs of eyes snapped to attention. I had never discussed inheritance with them before. It had been understood, though never stated, that whatever I had would be divided among them equally. The house, I continued, will not be passing to any of you. Silence thick and heavy. Instead, I've arranged for it to be donated after my death to the Boston Single Mothers Support Network. They'll either use it as a residence or sell it to fund their programs. Mom, Bryce said, lawyer mode engaging. That's not practical. The tax implications alone have all been considered by my estate attorney. I finished for him. The arrangements are quite solid. But this is our family home, Vivian protested. We grew up here. Yes, I agreed. And then you left. That's not fair. Camille interjected, tears forming in her eyes. We had to leave. That's what children do. They grow up and start their own lives. Yes, they do, I nodded, and now I'm doing the same. I went on to explain the other changes. The small life insurance policy would go to Gloria, who had been more family to me in recent years than my own blood. My retirement account, much healthier now after some astute investments Terrence had helped me make, would fund a nursing scholarship in my name. My personal possessions would be mostly donated, with a few meaningful items reserved for each child. A single piece of jewelry, a book, a small keepsake. However, I added, I've included a provision. Any child who demonstrates genuine care and attention in my remaining years, regular visits, practical help, real relationship, will receive an additional bequest. This is emotional blackmail, Asher said, his tech millionaire confidence shaken. No, I corrected him. This is a boundary. Something I should have established long ago. What about the loans? Camille asked, her voice small. The money you gave us for school, for houses, for businesses. Those weren't loans, I said. They were gifts from a mother who loved her children more than herself. I've written them all off. Is this because we didn't visit you in the hospital? Paxton asked, the only one seemingly trying to understand. We didn't know how serious it was. This isn't punishment, I told them, looking around the table at these 6 adults who had once been the center of my universe. This is me finally living my own life. You've all been telling me for years that you have your own lives now. I'm simply taking your advice. But you're our mother, Laurel said, as if that explained everything. Yes, I replied. I am. I always will be, but I'm also Eleanor Matheson, a woman with dreams and desires of her own, A woman who put those aside for decades to raise 6 children alone, and now I'm reclaiming those parts of myself. The evening ended earlier than planned. There were tears, Camille, arguments, Bryce and Vivian, sullen silence, Asher, awkward apologies, Paxton, and dramatic accusations, Laurel. I weathered it all with a calm I hadn't known I possessed. After they left, Ruby helped me clear the dishes. "You did well," she said, loading the dishwasher. "How do you feel?" I thought about it as I wrapped the leftover beef. "Wellington lighter," I finally said, like I've set down a burden I've been carrying for decades. "They might come around, you know," Ruby said, "now that they know what's at stake. If they do, it won't be because of the money," I replied. "It will be because they've realized that relationships require reciprocity. And if they don't realize that, then I haven't lost anything. I hadn't already lost long ago." The months that followed brought changes I hadn't anticipated. Paxton began stopping by every other Sunday, bringing books he thought I'd enjoy, and genuinely listening when I talked about my painting class or latest trip. At first, I suspected it was because of the inheritance provision, but over time I saw a genuine shift in him, a recognition of me as a person, not just his mother. Camille called weekly, sometimes just to chat about everyday things rather than asking for favors or money. She started bringing her children to visit, teaching them about my life in Ireland, asking me to share stories I'd kept buried for years. The others maintained a cool distance, though birthday and holiday cards now arrived punctually with personal messages rather than just signatures. Bryce sent legal documents for me to review, his way of checking that I was still mentally competent. I suspected Vivian called occasionally with medical advice I hadn't requested. Asher sent expensive but impersonal gifts. Laurel remained the most distant. Her hurt pride apparently deeper than the others, I expanded my social circle through my dance group and art classes. I went on a seniors cruise to Alaska with Gloria and 2 other neighbors marveling at glaciers in Wales. Ruby and I planned a trip to Japan for the cherry blossom season. My blog, Eleanor's Second Act, grew to have 15,000 followers, mostly women my age or older, discovering that life wasn't over. Just because their children were grown or their husbands had left or died, I received emails daily from women, thanking me for giving them permission to prioritize themselves after decades of putting others first. "You've become an influencer," Gloria teased, an influencer for the AARP set. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing," I replied. "We've been invisible for too long." For my 66th birthday, I hosted a garden party in my backyard. Gloria was there, and Ruby and a dozen new friends who valued my company and conversation. Paxton came with a thoughtful gift, a set of professional watercolor brushes. Camille sent flowers when she couldn't attend, due to a genuine work conflict. The others sent cards or texts. I didn't miss them as I once would have. The desperate need for their approval and affection had faded, replaced by a surprising contentment with my new life. As the party wound down and the spring twilight settled over Boston, I found myself sitting alone on the patio, nursing a glass of good Irish whiskey. The garden was in full bloom, not just the practical vegetables I'd grown when the children were young, but flowers in a riot of colors that served no purpose except to bring joy. "You seem happy," said a voice behind me. It was Gloria settling into the chair next to mine, with a grunt that acknowledged our mutual aging joints. "I am," I said, surprised at the truth of it, not just making the best of things, not just getting by, actually happy. "You deserved it long ago," she said, accepting the glass I poured her. "We don't always get what we deserve," I replied. "Sometimes we have to take it for ourselves." We sat in companionable silence as the stars appeared overhead. I thought about the girl who had come to America with nothing but hope and determination. I thought about the young mother who had sacrificed everything for her children. I thought about the woman I was now, older, wiser, finally understanding that loving others doesn't require erasing yourself. "I don't regret raising them," I said finally. "I don't even regret all I gave them. I just regret not teaching them to value it. Gloria nodded. Love without boundaries isn't really love, it's servitude. A lesson learned late, but not too late, I said, raising my glass to the night sky. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from Harrison, my first contact with him in almost 30 years. He'd seen my blog, he wrote. A colleague had shared it, not realizing the connection. He was proud of me, he claimed. He'd always known I was strong. He included his phone number, suggested we might meet for coffee the next time I was in California. I took the letter to my newly installed fire pit in the backyard and burned it, watching the ashes float away on the spring breeze. Some chapters deserved closure. Others just deserved to end. The next morning, I woke early and took my coffee to the small balcony off my bedroom. Once the master bedroom I had shared with Harrison, now my private sanctuary decorated in shades of green that reminded me of Ireland. Boston was waking up around me, the spring sun casting long shadows across the brick buildings. This city had witnessed my entire adult life. My arrival as an immigrant, my marriage, the births of my children, their departures, and now my rebirth. I thought about the heart that beat in my chest, damaged but healing, just like the rest of me. I thought about the 6 lives I had launched into the world for better or worse. I thought about the life that was still unfolding before me, rich with possibilities I had never imagined. On my phone, a notification appeared. A comment on my latest blog post from a woman in Arizona. "You've given me courage," she wrote. "After reading your story, I finally told my grown sons that I'm selling the family home and traveling the world. They'll survive, and for the first time in decades, I'll thrive." I smiled and typed a reply. "The most important lesson I've learned is that it's never too late to begin again. Safe travels on your journey." Then I set the phone aside and lifted my face to the morning light. The day was new, full of promise, waiting to be claimed. "This isn't the end," I whispered to myself. "This is my beginning."